Well, welcome to our September presentation. Basically, it's open to the public, and we love people coming. And if anybody wants to also really get involved and help out with the what we do, like going up to cemeteries and cleaning headstones, taking pictures and uploading it, or Malcolm and I were scanning high school yearbooks today. And, oh no, sorry, we were going to, but we ended up scanning a 1864 journal from Alexander Bartlett from Windsor. He was a Windsor lawyer, and there's a Bartlett law firm now and things like that. So all very exciting. And in Amherstburg, they have a Bartlett headstone, Alexander R. Bartlett, which is the same name as his journal. So we're not quite sure if it's the same person yet. So we're working on that. We'll talk to you. Anyway, so let me carry on here. So I'll just go through a few things about the Essex OGS and some of the events that are going on elsewhere, not just with us. So we do video record this. So if you ask questions of Chris Carter later on, it probably will be recorded verbally anyway. So hopefully that's okay. Upcoming events at Kent OGS up in Chatham. They have their meetings on Fridays, and they have the United Empire Loyalists talk coming up with Catherine Hogan. Anybody familiar with Catherine's talks and things? So, yeah, good. She does a lot of work, does a lot of presentations, and might be well worth the trip up the road on Friday night. So there's a good place to eat up there. So that's this Friday, actually, coming up at 7 o'clock at the Culture Center on William Street. Oh, is there? Okay. 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 Not talking loud enough, I guess.
Thank you.
Is that?
You can hear it
I
still?
can't hear.
Okay.
Still not on?
Just bring it up to your mouth. No more.
Oh, wait, turn it on. Technology.
Up close to your mouth.
Okay.
There you go.
There we go.
Thank you. Okay. Hopefully she edits all this out. So, and yes, come on in and find that there's a couple chairs there. They're short today. So, okay, the International Plowing Match. How many have not been to an International Plowing Match? One hand goes up. Yeah, it's coming up next week, the 18th through the Sunday, I believe. Or is that the Saturday? The 20th Saturday. Yeah, they have a lot of exhibitors and things like that. And guess who's going to be exhibiting there? OGS. Yeah, we have some volunteers that are going up, and Cindy has been our main coordinator for the booth and getting everyone shirts and badges and everything else. So it's going to be a good time next week. So yeah, there's going to be some giveaway door prizes. So I'm not sure quite how that's going to be handled. Probably you write your name and take a draw from a box or something like that. So and the family tree maker. We have a slide coming up on that, I believe, next. Yeah, one of the sales reps, Doug Olson, is coming through Ontario, and we're his first stop. In 2 weeks from today, he'll be here. And if you don't have a family tree database or program, I would definitely recommend coming and seeing this talk, learning about this family tree maker. And there's other ones out there. Roots Magic, what else is?
Legacy.
Legacy is another big one. So, but anyway, they're doing a big effort with OGS. They're making a stop through all the OGS branches up the Ontario. They're coming back to Detroit, to the Detroit Society of Geological Research in mid-October sometime. So that's another place to catch them. But well worth going if you've not got a computer program to capture all the data and all the family stories, and it's worthwhile going to. So 6:30, 2 weeks from today. Oh, or Chatham on the October 2nd, 6:30. And that's at McKinley's, that's a funeral, right? So, okay. Okay, AIRS, everyone familiar with AIRS down in Harrow? Another fantastic place for family history research. You've seen the facility upstairs. They've got a really nice one that's got a lot of local information around Essex County, not just Harrow. So anyway, they have the French Genealogical Society going down to give a talk. How many have been to the French Genealogical Society on Prince Road. Another fantastic resource, really good. They're open Tuesdays. I believe it's 10 o'clock till 8 o'clock at night. And I think it's maybe $5 to enter, or they have a membership fee as well. So another fantastic resource if you have French heritage and all. So that's September 27th. That's usually a Thursday at 1:30 in the afternoon down the Harrow. So if you have a bicycle, they have a bike route right there. You can just, seriously, I've done it. So it's a hard ride back, but it's an easy ride there. So. Okay, so we have, I just was texting with Dr. Teasdale, and he's excited about being here next month, which again, I believe is on a Tuesday, because of the holiday on the Monday. So it's Tuesday, October 9th at 7 o'clock. The library's off summer hours, so we'll be back to the 7 o'clock, which is our normal. So he's again very involved in all the French history research around the area. So another good talk. Volunteers needed. I sort of mentioned volunteers earlier. So cleaning headstones. Yeah, if you guys garden, we have places for you to pull weeds. Lots of them. So I'd say half the headstones need to be cleaned so that we take a good picture of it, so we can then transcribe it, and so it can then be uploaded to Canadian headstones, so other people can see it that don't live around the area. They can read the transcription and pull down a headstone picture. How many have ever gone on to a website looking for family members' headstones and things? So yeah, really nice to have. Eh? Well, someone has to do that. Someone has to get out to that, get on their hands and knees and pull the weeds, take the picture, and upload all that information. And Doug, again, the two back there, the left-hand corner, there are, I don't know how, the king and queen of Essex County for headstone picture taking. That's how it is. So they're nice to see them here today. So that's one thing. If you like taking pictures of headstones, you can do. I'll clean them. You can take a picture. So anyway, we do that on Tuesday mornings usually. So right now we're having heavenly rest at the Joan of Arc section. So so if you don't get a hold of us, just show up at 8:30 on a Tuesday morning. So rain or shine. But if it's really, really hot and humid and rainy, that probably won't be there. Another one on Mondays. Malcolm Campbell and I usually end up on at least during the summer, and Linda Urquhart might be there this winter. But we scan high school yearbooks, and we've now reached 350 yearbooks, which we've scanned, formatted, saved everywhere up into the cloud, and Linda has been posting them to the Essex OGS website for us. So it's there, it's searchable. We also search it and format it. So every yearbook takes at least an hour, and then we still have to upload it and things like that. So we've been having a lot of fun with it. We had a summer student doing a lot of them this summer, so that really got us. And Kent's doing the same thing. They've got a scanner. So we scan at the University Luddy Library, lower level West Wing, and they have a $30,000 scanner there that we're able to use. So it's quite a, again, we have a good time. We have a team maker if you ever want to stop by. Bring your yearbook. Yeah, Terry.
When are you going to do the 1,000 books that are in there for the deeds?
Well,
You're welcome to come on
you're welcome
board.
to bring your deeds, and we'll show you how to use the machine.
You,
I figure I've got 10 years of work just with yearbooks. So.
because I know that each one of those books is 700 pages, and they
Terry,
do.
is that the copybooks?
Those are the deed books, yeah. The copy deed books.
Yeah.
And with all.
And they have to be transcribed,
with
right?
the 3 counties, yes, because I literally had to go in there and transcribe them, because there's nothing that will help me do it quicker. To digitize the whole.
You could volunteer.
I will volunteer. I'll
Because,
talk to you later.
okay.
Okay.
Or just show up on Monday. We're there. G02. That's the route. So,
I know.
okay. Well, actually, it's very hidden. It's well hidden. 2019, their memberships are coming up. Right now, you can join OGS and find all these yearbooks online for $31.50. Plus, I think you have to join the Essex branch as well. So that's another $12. But anyway, the new memberships for 2019 you'll start hearing about that in November. So Anyway, like I said, we have a good time. You can get involved. We would like to be active and have fun. Anyway, tonight, this is why you're probably here. You really didn't want to listen to me. So we have, how many are familiar with Chris Carter and his tours and his books? And the guy does so much, it's unbelievable. So I have 10 pages to read of Chris Carter. And, you know, basically, though, he's been around. I've been on his bus tours, and I've purchased his books and read them. He's been very active in local history in Essex County. How many years have you been into it now?
Seriously, probably 10.
10? Okay.
Always into local history.
Yeah, and he makes it interesting. It's not like the old history teacher. No history teachers here. I didn't say old either, did I? But yeah, he makes it interesting and exciting. You get to go on. The next bus tour is going to have wine on it, wasn't it?
You can always throw that on there. Actually, one of them we served rum.
Right, see? Well, it was Rum Runners tour probably. So anyway, I won't go through all of this, but I'll ask Chris to come up and go through his presentation. I think he has books there later. So I don't know if you need that. He talks pretty louder than I do. So. Oh, okay. That's true.
Hopefully it'll work through the video. Here. Got a little one here. I don't know how many of you know Sutler Cyrus or not. Chef Wakefield. He follows the 1812 reenactors around, southern Ontario into Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, that area. So I thought I would start with something to wake you up and get you giggling maybe. You know, everybody's texting now, but we sure do know that the smoke signal was the first type of texting going. And he's got his version of it there. You can see little Sutler Silas in the corner. This is, he does sell books. This came out of a book that he has. And actually this one here is online. You should be able to find if you go on there and Google Sutler Cyrus, or Jeff Wakefield is his real name. But I've got a couple here. I thought they just sort of go pretty good with this. This one is really neat. I don't know if anybody wants to try it or not, but apparently it's how you clean the guns in the old days. So Sutler Cyrus says, you get a candle and you stick it in there and it suddenly cleans itself out. Well, there's something that happened here. We had a Lewis and Clark expedition. So they're on their way. Of course, they want to claim lots of land. And they had some helpers along the way. But I'm not sure if many people knew that Simon Girty met up with them and helped them out a little bit while he was on his own adventures. And the leader of that operation, that adventure, of course, was not Lewis and Clark. Was George Droulard, a resident of this area, led them on their trip through. So I thought that was pretty neat as well. But like I say, you got to have a little bit of fun going into this. Here's another one, of course. We got to be green. So we've decided that, you know, we shouldn't use trees and stuff to light it, or paper. So we have magnifying glass and we have solar powered muskets. Oh, I think we've seen that one. I don't know if many of you know that we had a headless horseman running around Essex County at one time. Highwaymen, if you wish. Well, the poor guy, of course, lost his head. The sheriff got him after a few years as well, but we won't go into that. But anyways, he decided he wanted a new head, so he went to Paris. So at the time that they were chopping off certain queens' heads, so he thought he'd be there at that time and catch one of them for himself. And the last one. Thinking the first critter would make a fine hat. Cyrus sees he has just shot Justin Bieber. So he's got a different kind of skin there for us. See if we, nope, that's not it. See if we can get to the presentation here. There we go. No. I'm glad it shows up better here than it did. If you want to look at this later, there's a copy of it on the back table that you can look at. This came out of the Amherstburg town history books. But what I want to show you here is we're going to go through some of these names, and you're going to find out that they all are fur traders. All right, John Askin Sr., John Askin Jr. is on there, John McGregor's on there, Angus McIntosh, William Mills, Forsyth and Richardson and Company. They're the ones that built the park house, floated it down the river, planted it in Amherstburg on that particular lot, and built a barn behind it for their warehousing, and that barn's still standing, is what I've been told. I hope that's right, because I put it in my book. Hey, you go you go to the experts, and they say, well, yeah, here it is, that's it. I said, okay, fine. Some of these things are hard to find 3 and 4 sources to verify. Robert and Thomas Forsyth on the bottom there. Oh, I'm sorry, the wiggly line, of course, is the river, if you can't see that. Alexander Mackenzie, they're still unsure which Alexander Mackenzie this is. He did have a nephew by that name, the Sir Alexander Mackenzie. And his house was where the not the Gordon house, I'm sorry, the restaurant they just ripped down. What was it? Duffy's. If you looked at Duffy's, there was a house buried in the middle of that. Okay? But the park house on that lot where William Mills and Forsyth, and that is, was facing the river, and the barn would be behind it up by the road. But like I say, if you look, you'll recognize some of those names as I go through tonight. There's John Askin Jr. over here, William Forsyth behind him. The Gordon house, which I was told was their warehouse. This one is very hard to see. That's the best we can get that picture. What I need is somebody who knows how to draw better than I do, and they can redraw it for us. It was drawn out before they ripped down Moy Hall or Moy House in 1912. All right, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Okay, there it is. There, the House of Moy. There's an actual photograph of it. Not the best, but you got to remember what they had for cameras back at that time. And that was scanned from a slide as well, so not from the original. There's a picture of it. You'll see it on the cover of my book. They had a cider mill in behind, the slave quarters in there. That shot is Nancy. Moy House was the last farm, the last of the French farms, although McIntosh wasn't French, obviously. But the French farms that were strip farms in Windsor, the last one, when they tore that down, they built Gladstone, Moy, and Hall Street. That was the last farm dividing Walkerville and Windsor. Just like today, you go into Tecumseh, if you don't see a sign, you don't know when you're in Tecumseh. It's all jammed together. Or now when you go into Sandwich Town, there's a big statue of Brock and Tecumseh to greet you as you go in. But don't hit it, you gotta go around it on a roundabout. But anyways, that's the last farm that came. And of course, that farm went back to Tecumseh Road for their 200 acres. But they had some money, they went all the way back to the third concession. So they had a fair amount of money. And of course, where'd they make it on the fur trade? What I want to point out in this beautiful painting is the dock. The houses on Gladstone, Moy, and that, like you say, they started at the river. It was the suburbs, if you can imagine. So they were building in the suburbs, and like I say, the houses were built around 1912. I don't know the exact day the house came down, but that's when that subdivision started, was in 1912. But anyways, when they built all those houses, they had, like now, they needed a place for the rainwater to go. Not the sewer, the rainwater. Okay, so the rainwater, of course, was all piped and then sent out into the river. Well, it should be clean, it's just off the road and so forth, right? So where did they bury it? They buried it in that dock. And it's still used today. That dock was built by 1796, and it's still there today. It may not look like that. It's had many, many revisions, and of course that's a painting anyways. But it's still there today if you go down to the end of Lincoln or Gladstone. I think they just fancied it up too when they did all the grass and stuff. There's nice railing around it. I used to fish off it and I had to run across the tracks fast before the train police caught me. But anyways, it is a very important home. The Nancy was the Northwest Fur Trade Company or Northwest Company's main shipping ship for getting the furs down to Niagara-on-the-Lake. And it was well used in the War of 1812 and was burnt at that time so that the Americans wouldn't get it. We didn't want the Americans to have the best ship on the Great Lakes. And if you go up to the Wasaga Beach area today, they have a Nancy Island in the middle of the river that pours into Georgian Bay there. And it's because the Nancy burnt to the water line, the rest of the hull sunk. It's at the mouth of the river, so all the sediment got caught, built an island. When they were looking for it, they realized that the island was actually the ship. They brought it up. There's a beautiful museum. It was built on the Rouge River on Zug Island there. That's where their headquarters was. That was the King's Wharf for Fort Detroit. They had little docks coming out from the fort, but you know what happens in the winter? They all disappeared. So they were in the Rouge River with the war. And today on that same piece of property is where Fort Wayne is. Okay, there's a couple pictures from up there. You can see the sand island. You can see what's left. They were smart enough there. They covered it. It's in a nice museum. When they pulled the one out that they found in Chatham, they put on their Tecumseh Park and it all rotted away. And I'm told there's furniture and canes and all kinds of neat things made out of it. Okay, Angus McIntosh. He was the one that was here. I don't know how much they do it now, but at that time he was recalled to Scotland to become the chief of the Clan McIntosh. My cousin from Teeswater had to go back in the early 1900s for the same reason, for the Donaldsons. So I don't know if they do that now. I know there's a thingy here somewhere. There was a gentleman from Essex County, I'm not sure who, but I have the pictures, the originals. They went over to Moy House in Scotland, and lo and behold, the clan chief has his fingers on the cannon. Got in the second from my side here, and there's another cannon just outside the picture, just at that end. Can't see it, obviously, it's out of the picture. Those two cannons were taken back with McIntosh to put there when he had to go over. His wife's buried in Assumption Church Cemetery. So you can see the cannons are there at that time. That picture would be sometime in the late 50s, early 60s, from my understanding. Okay. We're back to the Park House. They've moved it a few times, but you can see that at one time it was behind, facing the river. They brought it up to the front of the lot and then moved it to Navy Park. That is the headquarters of the Northwest Fur Trade Company, or the Northwest Company, their official name. That was it. That's how important that house is. So if you've never been there, please go. They do have a small room to the fur trade. They promote more Dr. Park being in there than they do the fur trade. But John Richardson, and not the writer, his uncle, had that house built on, and Richardson on the map had that house built on Zug Island. They took it apart, numbered all the logs as they took it apart, made a big raft, threw all their belongings on it, floated down river, and rebuilt it in Amherstburg on that piece of property where you saw it, where I mentioned to you earlier. Like I say, it's been moved at least, I think it's in its 4th location. Just to show the ties, this is not a good picture, but it's the only one that, it's a drawing as well, but it's the only one out there. This is Chatham on the McGregor Creek in Chatham, John McGregor's mill. And we'll talk about him a little later. He was a fur trader, and most of these people that had money, had land, the ones I mentioned to you, especially, also had land in Chatham. Okay? But I thought I would stick it in here while we were talking about the different people involved. And there's his the Cowan McGregor house in Sandwich was his house in Sandwich Town. Same gentleman, John McGregor. He was definitely part of the fur trade. The house was later used for 3 different newspaper mass, and it's a bakery today. It's well worth going into the bakery. Not only that, you get to see the inside of the house. They got a nice little tea room there as well. And I call the lady Mrs. Sandwich. Is that right, Mr. Sandwich?
She'd appreciate that.
See?
Her name is Mary Ann Carter.
Right.
She is Mrs. Sandwich.
And Terrence is the Mr. that not married that knows all the stuff too. If you want any questions about Sandwich Town and about these houses and the people there, they were built in 1-acre lots for executives. They were rich people. That was supposed to be a rich town. It was the capital of the Western District. So we got a nice big Mackenzie Hall, which was the courthouse with the jail. So if you were up in Sarnia and you had bought a piece of land, you had to come all the way down to Sandwich to the registrar's office to register that transaction. Or for any kind of large court cases that weren't just squabbling over a fence type stuff. This one here is in Amherstburg again. And I'm not sure the full story because it's not designated as a historic site. But one lame excuse is because they turned it, it now faces a side road instead of Dalhousie. But everything, all this money flowed through Amherstburg. Everything, BC, all the way down, flowed through Amherstburg. And all those furs flowed through Amherstburg. So what they put right across from the Park House, the headquarters, and the Gordon House and that, the Customs House. Somebody was there from collecting their money. We got to do that stuff, even way back then. So that is the Customs House. It's apartments now, and I still have no idea why it's not designated yet. We won't attack you, okay? Yeah, you too. Okay, the Jacques Bobby House. I'm going to talk a little bit about the building of this house a little bit later, and I have confirmed that with the people who take care of it, although there's others that might know a little bit more. But anyways, the Bobby family came down for the fur trade. I'm just going to cut in here a little bit and leave it there for a second. That is in Sandwich Town. The new Hunter is kitty corner to it. The mill, the replica mill they built that was there in 1812 is kitty corner to it. And it's on, obviously, Mill Street down at the water. Cadillac departed Montreal in June of 1701. He had 100 voyagers, 25 birch bark canoes, He was sent by King Louis the 14th to establish Fort Pontchartrain at Detroit as a new center of the fur trade and military power in the interior regions. Now, when that happened, I've got a set of books over there, but I've got the list at the back. There's a 2-page list. They're not in alphabetical order of who was on there, but you may recognize some of the families. But the first one on there was the Bobby family. Why? Because they were the leaders of that fur trade. He was the expert. And it's his family that built this house. And Jacques is one of the children. And downtown we have the Francis Bobby house. But you can see the list at the back. It's on this back table over here. And it is 2 pages. And they came out of the blue books over there. You can take a look at them later if you want. But the point is that that's why they came. The fur trade. They wanted those furs for France. The British didn't care. They were up north. They were in Rupert's Land. They went out Hudson Bay and they went to England. These were heading to France at this time. There's the one downtown. I'm sure many of you have been in it. I want to remind you that when you do walk in it, you're walking in the back door because naturally the house faces the river. Most of these houses I showed you are all built the same way as far as the layout. Some have bricks, some have siding, some have a French style of building them, but basically you walk in the front door, you can go right out the back door, shotgun style. You've got chimneys on both sides to heat each side of the house. And when you, one side will be the gentleman's and the office for the fur trade business. The other side will be the parlor for the women. And they're pretty much all the same, including the park house. But every one that I showed you has that office and gentleman's room on one side and the parlor on the other. I want to mention the Great Sauk Trail. To make it very easily, the Sauk Indians were just below what is now Chicago. They came on a trail. It actually ended in Oxley, but they came here and they went to Matthew Elliott and the fort with their furs to trade furs for British goods. They also came to get their goodies later for helping. Some people call it welfare or whatever. They were here, they came quite a ways, and that sign is in the Navy Park. But they were one of the Indian tribes that participated in the fur trade. This one here is Matthew Elliott's house. He was with the Indian Department. Many of the Indians wanted to deal with him because he was their go-to person. So he was involved in the fur trade as well, keeping the Indians coming this way and not to the Americans or whoever else they found to trade with, the Hudson Bay Company, for example. There's some trading dealing going on there. This picture I actually took in Fanshawe Heritage Village or Fanshawe Park in London. And we were there for a weekend doing the 200th of the 1812 battle and that in London. The war did get up to London. But the building in the background, I know it's the back of the building, but if you go to the front, it'll say London Brewery, which is how it started. John Labatt bought it, and it became Labatt's. And the factory is still on the original site of this, where this one stood. So it hasn't moved far from right downtown London. But they did, this is a replica. It was built for the Centennial 1967. And I felt I was pretty honored to be able to sell my books out of it. James Douglas. It says he was penny pinching. Well, he is Scottish. What more can I say? So am I. Okay. Mentioned that before. I'm a Donaldson and a Grant and many others. And 10 years ago, we closed up our woolen mill in Edinburgh. Anyways, he thought he owned everything. he decided he would go out and cover all the west. So he covered the western part for the Northwest Company, and of course he had a big mansion in Montreal. That's what I want to show here. What they have there is an area they call the Square Mile. It's still there today. That's James McGill's house that became the university. Simon McTavish, another fur trader, one of the owners. He was right downtown, as you can see, a little more into town. There's the book I took this out of. It is very interesting. On the Merchant Princes of Montreal. So at the time of the War of 1812 and just before, the 10, 15 years before, was the golden age of the fur trade. Now I'm going to read through a list of the people that were with the Northwest Company, or Northwest Fur Trade Company, but they didn't have fur trade in their name. It was the Northwest Company. You may recognize most of these. If not, we've got a elementary school teacher here. He will teach you about this. I think it's grade 5 I learned about explorers. Is that right? Oh, grade 5? No? That's okay. Anyways, I'm sure I learned about explorers in grade 5. The Golden Age, these were with the Northwest Fur Company. Please keep that in mind. Sir Alexander Mackenzie, David Thompson. He was not with the Hudson Bay Company, but for 1 year. Simon Fraser, Simon McTavish, James McGill, the different French voyageurs, and the Métis. Okay. Anybody know what all of those have in common? Where's Malcolm?
They probably have property in Essex County.
They all do. Most of them in Sandwich. Imagine that. But the point is, do we not have a Mackenzie River?
Yeah.
Thompson River? What about a Fraser?
Yes.
Yeah? These explorers were sent out, these workers, employees of the company, were sent out west to find more land. The Hudson Bay had Rupert's Land. That's all the water that drained into Hudson Bay, right to the very mouth. So basically, to keep it short and easy, the 3 prairie provinces was Rupert's Land. That was Hudson Bay. All right? Naturally, a little bit on this side, but the vast majority of it was the prairie land. A gentleman named John Jacob Astor ran the Pacific Fur Trade Company. He was from New York. Many of you may recognize that name. He worked from the 42nd parallel south. So what did that leave our poor Amherstburg people? 42nd to the 49th. So animals move, obviously, but I mean, this was big. Everybody was taking as much as they could get. Nobody was worried about leaving some for babies. They were taking everything. They started running out of places to get the fur. So what they have to do, they had to go further and further. The names I read you were all explorers that we learned about in elementary school that were sent by the Northwest Fur Trade Company to find more land. The only place they could find it was what became British Columbia. Because if you're this side of that, of course, that's Hudson Bay land, and they didn't like you walking on their land one little bit. In fact, so much so, in 1812, they had a battle out there at Seven Oaks. And the Métis and the Indians and the mostly at that still French fur traders that were with this company attacked the Hudson Bay because they were creeping on their land. And that was a massacre. We won. All right, so they were getting squeezed, they had to go. And to help you out, when they all became, in 1821, when they all went under Hudson Bay Company, all three of them, the Hudson Bay Company had trading posts all the way down to San Francisco. What I didn't mention in there is where the War of 1812 comes in, and I just got the, the Pony Express is slow. I just got this, and it's September 1812 newspaper. Just arrived. Darn, it's slow. And they're talking about General Holland having to explain why he gave up Detroit without a fight. But anyways, John Jacob Astor, the Northwest Fur Company, Hudson Bay didn't give a crap. They were far north. They weren't involved in 1812. What they were doing, they said, hey, we're the only ones with money, because nobody else had money. I mean, they had wheelbarrows of money. Okay, it came from Scotland, France, to Montreal, and then to Niagara-on-the-Lake, where they flipped it, which was Newark, and then came down here. So it was mostly the Northwest Fur Trade Company that paid for the War of 1812, and especially in this area. All the ships were part of it, and they had a lot. And on the American side, again, the United States just started. They hadn't even figured out how to collect taxes yet. They had no money. They owed money and money and money for the Civil War, which, by the way, they just paid off in the 2002. They paid off the Civil War finally. Yeah. So they had no money. So who had the money? John Jacob Astor of the Pacific Fur Trade Company. So he lent them the money on one condition: you leave my business alone. Okay. Now, what kind of nonsense did we have down here? You had the only people with the money is the people doing all the business here. Leave us alone. We had some sort of little skirmishes. I wouldn't even call the Battle of Detroit a battle. They walked in and took it. Somebody in Congress said that they'd do that to us. We did it to them. But anyways, the point is they had the money. John Jacob Astor didn't trust the American government, even with all that. So he sold his whole Pacific company, Fur Trade Company, to the Northwest Company for the proverbial dollar. And that's why Hudson Bay ended up with so much of the land when they amalgamated, and so much in the U.S. This is on the side of the Dominion House in Sandwich Town. And what is neat about it, he was buried across the street. So he was a prominent Montreal family fur trader in Sandwich, 1790. He was also the first Jewish person in the area. So he gets a big plaque that probably needs a little cleaning up in Sandwich Town there.
Well, we had to rebury him back in the Jewish cemetery.
Yes, because there's his burial mausoleum. That was across the road from the Dominion, correct?
Well, see, you can see the Dominion House in the background.
Yes. But it moved from one side of the road to the other too, the Dominion, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It burned down, and it was put where you see
Right.
that picture. That picture was taken in 1973 when it was still there.
Okay. So it was moved, first known Jew in the community. I don't know if that makes any difference or not, but it's worthy of a sign, right? Frenchtown, I just want to mention it for a few minutes. We sort of burned it down. We didn't do, well, the Americans actually burned it down after the Battle of Raisin River. But there is something that's left. I'm going to go through a few of these slides. This is a fur trade house. And it's still standing. And it's at least as old as the Park House, if not older. Navarre was the name of the fur trader. You go down to, it's taken care of by the Monroe Museum. And they will take you through on a tour. They have special events there. If not, you got to call up if you're real interested, they'll take you on a private tour for the fur trade, if you're interested in that in particular. But you'll see how these boards are notched. These are the uprights and the side ones. This is an interior wall, by the way. And they notch them, and they use pegs where necessary to hold the boards up. Because, I mean, you just put in a notch, it falls off, right? So that is, like I say, it's set up as a fur trade building. That's a mirror upstairs that they use so people don't climb up to show that they stored all the furs up top. You can see the building of it, how it was built. You can see the walls there. I was told, and I went to the people of I mentioned the Jacques Bobby house. They have a lot of it that's built that way with the logs notched and put into the post. Not the way, not like you would think of a log house, because it technically isn't one. But they have that same notching. Okay, so there's a typical French farm down in Frenchtown. Okay, this is a sort of neat northwest trade gun that they traded. There it is there. There's a close-up of some of the detailing on it. This is what they used to trade with the Indians. And they have one there for you to look at. Red River expedition there. We're getting near to the end. I want to go through a couple of these notes because I sort of skipped through some of them. We talk about the King's Navy Park and the ships being built there. Well, my understanding is there was only one built there, and that was the Detroit. The Hunter and many of the others were repaired there, but they weren't built there. But I also mentioned that the ships of the Northwest Company were used in the war. Nancy was built in again about 1795-6 era, right before we had to leave to come here, maybe a couple of years earlier, over on Zug Island. At Moy Hall, though, they had a shipyard. It wasn't just a dock. The Caledonia was built there. The Duke of Wellington was built there. The Axmouth was built there. They were involved in the Battle of Lake Erie. Okay, the Duke of Wellington was the first full rig brig on the lakes at 110 tons. The Axmouth was 30 tons. It was the first vessel ever taken over the Sioux Portage, dragged over the portage and relaunched in Lake Superior. Think of that, 30 tons. Dragged over the portage. They didn't have the canal belt yet. And this might help some of you, or you might recognize this. Captain James Hackett of Amherstburg was the one that was piloting that ship at that time. Okay, if you do go down to the end of Moy Street and Riverside, don't park on Riverside, it's pretty busy. Turn on to Moy. They have some plaques there and a couple stone on the stone pillars with some lights on top that tell you a little bit about Moy House. All right. And yes, it was built, they're saying it was built in 1797. The Nancy was built, there you go, here's the date, 1789 on the Rouge River, 25-meter long schooner. It was named after John Richardson's wife. And his nephew Alexander was the captain of that. There was also a few of the smaller ships, like the ones that Hall took up to Chatham on their, not Hall, I'm sorry, Proctor and on the run there that they took up Chatham. Those ships were also built at Moy House at that dock. So of all the three or the two Navy parks, the Detroit one and the Amherstburg one, there was more ships built at Moy Hall for the Northwest Fur Trade Company. All right, there's quite a story on them. I just posted from the legends of this area. I've got a full book. It's about that thick and worth about $150. It was 1883. It was written on the legends of this area. On my Facebook for Tour Essex group, you will find a story about Moy Hall and the legend there. I don't know if you believe it. It depends what you believe in. I can see it being happening. I've heard of it before. I'm not going to tell you. You go find it. If not, email it me and I will send it to you on an email. Okay? So the Northwest Fur Trade Company was made up of different companies. There was Todd and McGill, Benjamin and Joseph Forbisher, and McGill and Patterson. There was the XY Company, Richard Forsyth Duff and Company, which I mentioned in Amherstburg there, McTavish, Forbisher and Company. They were all fur trade companies. They all amalgamated into the Northwest Fur Trade Company. And that was, that started, the new Northwest Fur Trade Company started in 1784. And there's a lot here of who the different, I've got, and you'll see them in my book, it's who the different people were that were involved and directors and that. The, what I said before is like all the furs came to Amherstburg. Okay. Mackinac Island, they came from there down. They came from all over the west to Amherstburg, to the Park House. That's where everybody came. And then they packaged them up, put them on the Nancy or one of these other ships I mentioned that were owned by the Northwest Fur Company, shipped down to Newark, which is Niagara-on-the-Lake, transferred onto a ship that took them to Montreal. Now in Montreal, the square mile that we talked about, those people, if you talk to the French in Montreal, they were the mob. You had to get through them to be able to take your French farm products and send it out. That didn't go over so well with the mob. So the French farmers had to take them to one of the other places, you know, whether they went all the way to Quebec or some of the other towns in between Montreal and Quebec, because they couldn't, got tired of fighting the mob to get their product on there. One of the people of that mob, if you wish, or whatever we want to call him, he was not part of the fur trade company, but man, this guy had buckets of money too. He had grist mills, he had warehousing that he rented out to guess who, to get some money. He built most of Montreal with his money. You may know this guy, John Molson. Also, he had a brewery there, imagine that. Well, I walked into the Bank of Montreal in Amherstburg last year, and I said, "What are you doing? When's your birthday party?" Huh? John Molson started the Molson Bank. The director was John Richardson. He was the father of banking in Canada. We're talking to John Richardson that built the Nancy, not his nephew, John Richardson, who was the writer, okay, and had Dundurn, his house was where Dundurn Castle is. Two different people, one generation apart, right? Uncle and nephew. But anyways, John Molson said, "Hey, you know," and Richard said, "We got all this money, we got to do something with it. We shouldn't have cartloads sitting outside of cash." And I'm sure a whole bunch of IOUs as well. So they built a bank, the Molson Bank. Now, when you're a bank, if you want more business, you have to have branches, right? We have branches all over the place. Well, they only needed 2 branches because they were the mob, so the French people said. They were the ones that had money. It doesn't matter what you call them. They were the smart entrepreneurs, mostly Scottish people. All right, because the English ran the Hudson Bay Company. Anyways, the Molson Bank was started. Their first branch, Amherstburg. And their second, Newark, Niagara-on-the-Lake. Where's the money? The transfer point. Or maybe they started the same day, but hey, I'm down here. I'm going to say Amherstburg was started first. But anyways, they were started at the same time. Why did I go in there and say, "When's your birthday party?" 200 years old in 2017 at Molson Bank, which became the Bank of Montreal. So 201 years ago, the Bank of Montreal, or Molson Bank, was established in Amherstburg. Yes?
Mr. David's brother was on the board of directors of the bank.
Thank you.
And unfortunately, we do not have a picture of Mr. David, but we have a picture of his brother.
All right. But again, you can see the ties, right? Sandwich Town, those were all 1 acre lots. They were estate lots, executive lots. They were expected to put those big houses on them. If you go and find some of the paintings from 1812, you'll only see two-story buildings. And you've seen both of them today in Amherstburg. What is now the Gordon House, and the guy who wanted to collect the money for the government, the Customs House. It's the only two in the picture. So I'm not going into all this boring stuff. All right. I've got this one here. This has got quite the story, and I know that it can be told by people better than me, this story. You'll find this picture. I use it for in my books, in my logo. I've been to this building, Sally Ains' house. Sally Ains was a fur trader. She owned 1 mile back, 1 mile, I believe it was 1 mile back from on the north side of the Thames River, from Lighthouse Cove all the way up to Chatham, all the way up to the Forks. Now she got beat out of her, she actually paid for that land 3 times, but she got beat out of it. The government didn't like that. They kicked Simcoe out so she wouldn't get it. It was one of the reasons. John Simcoe was ready to give it all to her. She ended up with a 200-acre lot. But her house is still surviving today, and it is older than the Park House. It is, the only one that may not be older is the Navarre House in Frenchtown or Monroe now.
Where is it?
Oh, this one's hidden in the bush. We can't tell. Even the people that I went into the OGS in Chatham, and they couldn't tell me where it was. All right. But it did get moved back from the river because it was going to go swimming. Well, they built close to the river, and the rivers, you know how they go, they erode. That's what rivers do. And I know it's dark, but it's buried in the bush. This, before I go into the inside, I want you to know that a family, the people who own it, have lived in that house the way it's sitting, and you'll see it, right through to the mid-1970s in Sally Ains' house. Pardon?
It looks like they just walked, we've been there, but it just looks like they walked away.
Well, they did. When the family who has it, their house is across the road. Man, you don't go down that path without getting it. Like, don't do it. Be nice. I keep forgetting I got this thing. Okay? Now we're inside. You'll tell me what you don't see, of course, is hydro. Oh, we'll go back to that in a minute. No hydro, no water.
No internet.
No, definitely not. Cool stove, huh? Okay. I want to go back to this picture that I skipped through. I want you to see that anyways. Sally Ains, basically, from what we know, the only female fur trader. She was a somebody. She was a Oneida Indian from New York area. She married a Montour. Guess what? Montour was one of the directors and one of the people involved in the Northwest Fur Trade Company. She spent her life in a canoe, traveling around, collecting her furs and bringing them into Amherstburg. She ended up splitting from Montour and married Ains, obviously. That didn't last too much longer either. But she lived in that fine house. She had a couple servants or slaves or whatever we want to call them at the time that kept up her property, farmed what little she wanted farmed, and took care of her when she was around. Why is she on $100 bill? We had a vote a few years ago or so on 4 ladies on who to put onto the $100 bill. She didn't quite make that. Not many people know who she is, unfortunately. But she became Catholic. She was born buried in the Catholic cemetery in Amherstburg, which is plowed under because the Catholics built a nice new church, and they took down or got rid of their old church and plowed the cemetery up and built houses on there. Oh, they had to make money that way, right? Am I correct so far? Thank you. Anyways, I am told, maybe it's a legend. I got a book to stick of legends from the area. You'll get them online, but as I put them on. But anyways, I was told that she was found when they were doing a renovation on a kitchen. She was found sitting in her canoe, wrapped in her furs, with many of her tools of the trade with her. And if you don't know, when you're buried in clay, you last forever. Okay, they sell eggs in Asia. They take the egg just as it is, like you take it out of your fridge. They put it in, bury it in a field of clay for so many years and sell them like for 10, 20 bucks an egg, and I guess it's the biggest delicacy going. Clay preserves. All right. How much of a legend this is, I don't know. I wasn't down here when they did do that. There's 2 other things I want to mention. I think I've got all this. I think I've got all the pictures here. See if I can get to the rest of them. But yes, the father of the lady that's looking after this was the last person to live in this place. He passed away in the mid 70s sometime. But this is a very historical house. It's got one heck of a story, and the lady that goes with it has an even bigger story, and we definitely want it preserved. They are taking very good care of it, believe me. They're very responsible people as far as the history of this house goes. What is neat is on the front porch is the family cemetery, or in the front of the house. But remember, they moved the house there, right? So you can see the hill starting to go up on the far side there. That goes up to the cemetery. I threw this picture in. This is Lucasville, which is on the corner of number 8 and Disputed. Is Lucasville Western High School is across the road. He was this gentleman was the Anderton fire chief. I guess his big thing was what one of the chemical companies there burnt or something, and it was under his time. But what I want to show is even today, and I know this is probably hunting, but even today the fur trade is going on in Essex County. There's still people that trap the animals around the Cedar Creek, or I'm sorry, the River Canard area. And so even today we have that going. Sandwich Town had a big fur trade company.
Several.
What was the?
Bobbies were always.
No, later. Bishop?
Yeah, Bishop.
Bishop Fur Company was going in the 1900s.
The building is still there.
The building's still there?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an artist colony now.
Good, I'm glad it's being used, but it's still there. They were a division of an American company. You can Google them. I always want something to end up with. I had a little bit of stuff at the front. I spent every summer I was growing up on the Indian Kettle Point Indian Reserve, and I learned an awful lot about what was going on. Chief Charlie Shawkens was my mentor at the time. My dad died when I was 10. He sort of half adopted me, but not fully. My mom wouldn't let him. But anyways, so I learned a lot about the ways of the Indians and their problems. Maybe he wasn't so well schooled, but I'll tell you, he went to Ottawa and he could tell them exactly what was going on. He knew his Indian history, but he is a direct descendant of Chief Tecumseh. There's 4 last names, and I don't have the list here, 4 last names of families on the Kettle Point Reserve that are all descendants of Tecumseh. Okay, just in case you missed one more. All right, I want to I want to show you this little book. Most of you know that I've done a book. I reprinted a book by Reverend Cowan, who had churches in, was a minister in Chatham as well as this area. He's an Essex County historian. He was part of the original, I can't think of their name. What's the group you're with, the Michigan Windsor group? Algonquin Club. The Algonquin Club did not start in 1932 when they say it did. It started like way, way back. The Mr. Neal that wrote the sandwich book, Frederick Neal, he was a member of that. All the somebodies in Sandwich were a member of that, and yes, they met in Toronto. And then when they came, then it sort of shrunk down to just Essex County, and today that group is still going. But while this gentleman was on the executive of that, he wrote at least three books, I know of 4 books, but 3 on the history. The Detroit Frontier is out there. I didn't bring it with me, but you can buy it at some of the bookstores or, again, email me. And it's an excellent book on the history of Kent County, Essex County, and the Detroit area from 1701 up to the end of the War of 1812. And I say Kent County because I showed you, like most of these people we discussed today had land up there, housing, businesses. If you got one here, it's not too hard to build another one. The second, and it'll tell you it's volume 1. It took a long time well, if there's volume 1, is there volume 2? We found that. There's only 1 copy, and it's not even in book form. It's not even in a very good form at all. But it is in the historic, locked under key in the Central Library in Chatham. And hopefully we can get that out to print. It's being worked on. Is it not, Cindy?
Yes.
Good. We want to get that out there in print because it's only about Kent County, but I'll tell you, that stuff is fantastic. I mentioned earlier I had to go up to the Kent County group and talk, Chatham Kent group and talk about Chatham. And yeah, really. And then I thought, well, what am I going to talk about? You know what? I got that book. It's not a book because it's never did get into a book, but we got all the pages. Anyways, I decided to talk about it. And that was the final straw to get them to start reprinting it because the information is fantastic. Hopefully we get it out soon. Like I mentioned, he was a Methodist or United, a Methodist at that time, minister. And he was up in Sault Ste. Marie as one of his places to be a minister. And he wrote the yearbook 1937, and it was a gold and silver jubilee of Sault Ste. Marie. Half the book, the first half of the book, to the Northwestern, we put at that time, Fur Trade Company, who founded the city of Sault Ste. Marie, Canada. Where was that Fur Trade Company from? And all those people? Amherstburg. And whom had the honor of constructing the very first canal at the St. Mary River Rapid. There's a replica of it on the picture on the front. And to the Canadian Pacific Railroad Company, who allowed it to grow once the railroad came through. So I put down here, founders, the Northwest Fur Company of Detroit, Amherstburg, and Upper Canada. And Sault Ste. Marie, 1787 to 2017. And that, like I say, that came out, this book was done for, what did I say, 1937. Okay, so it's not a big book, it's a reprint. I did not write it, I just put a pretty cover on it. But the grandson who lives in Windsor pushed me to do it, and I said, well, are you going up to Sault Ste. Marie to sell them? Nope. What am I going to do? I'm not going to sell them down here. I found a connection, not selling them. He was so happy to get them in print. He put a from the family story in here, and a little bit about his grandfather in the back with some pictures and stuff. So they wanted to get that in this, they pushed and pushed and pushed, and I called them up like 2 years later, said, hey, I found a reason to print it. But it's pretty neat, it's little, it's $10. Reverend Hugh Cowan, on the back of the book, shows you the second locks, set of locks, because the ships got bigger. They didn't have to pull them over the portage anymore, because this one here wouldn't have taken much more than those big fur trade canoes through it. That's all they need to get through, that's as much as they build. You ever tried building anything up north? You sweep off, when you build a house, you sweep off the ground and start building because you're on bedrock as soon as you sweep the leaves off the ground. I built 3 houses up there that way, and then you have to, you take your cement and make something level. You're on the bedrock, and then you start building your house on top. Can't get anything better, it's not going nowhere. So they tell me. But anyways, I'm gonna end this. The fur trade is what made Essex and Detroit, Essex County and Detroit what it is today. As I said, Detroit was settled in 1701 as the base for the fur trade and control of the route to the upper lakes. The money the fur trade brought in made many millionaires. Many members of the family compact made their money in the trade. And that was a problem in 1837, correct? They wanted, well, we have the money in Britain. If you have the money, you control everything. We didn't like that system. Remember, we came here. The Northwest Company sent trappers and explorers, or one in the same, to the West-ONT for more fur trapping grounds. These are the people that discovered most of British Columbia. The money and the furs rolled into this area, shipped to Montreal and overseas to market. The government wants their cut, like I said, at 68 Gore Street is which are apartments, is the customs house. After amalgamation, the Hudson Bay Trading Store was established. And I probably didn't get that quite right, but anyways, Ruthven had a Hudson Bay Trading Store. The building is still there today. The sign is still on it, although you can't see it. A lot of these buildings, they've covered it with, funny siding and stuff like that. But that is one place where, and I mean, Amherstburg had one. The gentleman who had it wrote a book about his adventures in the War of 1812. He was from Quebec, but he decided since he was here, he would go with our militia. He can tell you all kinds of neat stories about hiding in swamps along the path from the Raisin River up to Fort Detroit. So travel along, go on my tour, or make your own up and learn about the fur trade, because that's what built this area. That's why we're here. Everything else was a consequence of it, or protecting it. And that's what's important. Thank you very much.
I'm up here again.
You're up here again.
Anyway, I want to thank you, Chris. Very entertaining.
Well, thank you.
Coming in. I think you could open your own library with all your books, and but I do believe you have some for sale over here.
Yeah,
as well.
there is, and there's copies of the newspaper. It costs you one of those gold coins that are in your pocket or purse.
So, sounds good. So, yep.
I do have the original at home, by the way, of that newspaper. Okay, if you're interested, if you're not, that's fine. I believe you should have some at your room in the
Possibly.
OGS.
We have a lot of your stuff there.
Yeah, I think I left a couple
Yeah.
last time I was there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Go your
Couple
way.
questions?
Oh.
Can we take questions?
Nope, yep, I guess you can, sure.
Why did they call it the Moy House?
Well, the Moy, he named his house Moy. Most of, like, he didn't have addresses. You go to England today, many of them don't have addresses. You deliver the mail by the name of the house. And that was his estate in Scotland, was House of Moy. And that's why I said, remember, he went back, and at that, he took those 2 cannons. That was the House of Moy, which was the home of the clan chief of McIntosh and his home. Yes, Debbie?
Where were the cannons from?
The cannons came off to Nancy. They were the only 2 rescued that way. The rest were burnt or dragged away. Yes?
I heard that Todd Lade and Cabana are both named after fur traders, is that correct?
There was a fur trader with Todd, I don't remember the other, I
Or
can't,
Masters,
yeah, I can't, say for sure, I don't know. Did you,
Todd was McGill's partner.
okay.
That was one of them. The other one
Cro-
was,
Crawford was in the War of 1812.
yeah.
She said Cabana.
Oh, Cabana,
And Todd Lane becomes Cabana, which
Yeah.
maybe that's a connection, right?
yeah, I don't know, I don't recognize that name at all, as far as the name, no,
But Todd is TODD,
yeah.
which is one of the partners with
Yeah.
McGill.
And it could have been one of the fur traders. I mean, they had lots of fur trade, like people that did their work. These guys were the big people, not they worked differently unless they were explorers. Remember, they were only workers too. Like David Thompson, when he went out, was like 19 or 20 or something. 21 at the most when he went for a couple of year walk. Yes,
Thanks for a great presentation. How do you spell Ames?
A-N-I,
A-I-N-S-E-S. Ames.
I'd have to look it up here, but yeah.
A-I-N-S-E-S, yes.
S-E-S. A-I-N-S-E-S.
No, yes.
No, maybe it's just S-E.
S-E, it ends with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to,
A-I.
I want to make sure I have it right, that's what my, yeah, A-I-N, yeah, S-E. Yes.
I'm just gonna suggest Moy is short for money.
Well, they had lots of it. And I say, I don't want to say too much about that story, but you may enjoy that if you can find that on the Tour Essex group on Facebook. I say, if not, email me. If you haven't got my email, pick up a bookmark over there, you'll have it. Or one of my lists of books, and you'll have that. There, like I say, there are a couple papers at the back you can look at. If you're interested in any of this material, I have it for sale. And there's 2 blue books there that are all about the early French. If you're really into French history, you may want to copy down the name and the author there and try and find them online. My set cost me $200. Prove me that there's, find something cheaper. I'm sure they're out there. Okay. But thank you for coming. I enjoy going around to the different groups. Elder College, I don't know what is left or what's open. You can sign up for Elder College out of Canterbury College. And I'm doing a trolley tour on the life and times of Richard Pollard, who was the minister for the soldiers at the fort. And he built 4 churches, or started 4 churches. We're going to the 3 in Essex County. And they're pretty neat buildings. Okay, all you have to do is be over 55 to join. Malcolm here can tell you all about it. Paul can tell you all about it. He's here with the blue shirt.
When is the tour?
Jim, I'm sorry.
Chris, when is the tour? You have somebody asking what day the tour is?
I don't know. You'll have to, I honestly
Oh,
don't.
sorry.
I booked the day off work, but I don't know what day I booked off. I couldn't tell you. These guys, that's their ball game. They just say, hey, Chris, will you do a freebie? Sure.
Thing they do.
One other thing, Michelle put together a couple flyers for the next events that are coming up, if you're interested. So I'll leave these on the front here. And one thing I forgot, I was at, Malcolm and I went to the Detroit Society of Genealogical Research on Saturday. They have their meetings usually the second Saturday of the month at 10:30 at the Detroit Public Library. So they always have good topics. It's really interesting. But they mentioned also that the Michigan Genealogical Council has their fall seminar. It's a 1-day seminar in Flint, and it's really, really well attended and usually very good. So some of these flyers, I brought them back, and they're on the front desk up there as well. So if you're at all interested in Michigan and the genealogy over there, because I don't know about you, but I know a lot. A couple hundred years ago, it wasn't really a border that we respected, I guess. So, back and forth. Anyway, thanks for coming. This was great.